I wanted to make this video for quite a while, and I thought now would be the perfect time for me to do it because I'm out of ideas for videos, and why not? So, as you probably already know, as some of you know, I love the Beatles. They have really good music and really good talent. I also like some of the movies that they were in. And there was this movie that came out last year, and it's called Yesterday, named after the song. And it was loved by critics and audiences, but I didn't like this movie, not one little bit. And I know that sounds shocking because I am a huge Beatles fan, and I'm gonna explain why I didn't like this movie. So, what is the plot of this movie? Well, basically, everyone forgets who the Beatles are, except for this guy named Jack, who is a musician. And here is my first problem with this movie. Everyone forgets who the Beatles are because of a blackout. A blackout. You know, those moments when the electricity would go out for a short period of time. And by the way, this was an international blackout. Now, I do understand that this is just a movie, and anything is possible in a movie. But I still didn't like this. So then, the next day, Jack decides to sing one of the Beatles' songs to his childhood friend Ellie, who I think has a crush on. I'm sorry, I just can't talk right now. And of course, she thinks that he's the one who made the song while he just sang the song. And he tries to convince her that he did not make the song and it was by the Beatles, and she doesn't know who the Beatles are. And like I said, no one knows the Beatles anymore except him. And then he tries to Google the Beatles, but there's no results. And before I saw this movie, I expected him to try and get everyone to remember them. But what does he actually do? He re-records all of their songs and claims it as his. And this is the biggest problem that I have with this movie. And yes, I understand that everyone forgot who the Beatles were except for him. And if he kept telling everybody that it's the Beatles that made this that made this song or these songs, they would probably think he's crazy, but I still don't like it. And this is another thing that just drives me crazy. He's the only guy who remembers the Beatles and their music, yet he forgot how Eleanor Rigby goes. And Eleanor Rigby is one of the Beatles' #1 hits. Jack, how are you the only person who remembers the Beatles, yet you can't remember how one of their songs goes? That doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, after he records all the music, he does some touring. He goes all over the world to perform these songs. And the covers of these songs in this movie are really bad, in my opinion. Especially Help. That one is especially bad. And, speaking of everyone forgetting who the Beatles are, including Google, here's another problem I have. They even forgot what Coke was and what a cigarette was. What do cigarettes and Coke have to do with the Beatles? They might have something to do with the Beatles, but maybe I'm just missing out. Anyway, speaking of remaking the songs, he even remakes all of the albums. And he even redesigns all the album covers. And his version of the album covers are just less iconic. The Beatles have one of, if not the, most memorable album covers in history. If you look at an imitation, or a parody of the Sgt. Pepper album cover, you will know exactly what it's referencing, even if you're not a Beatles fan. And let me put Sgt. Pepper as an example. The name of the album album is Sgt. Pepper, yet it has nothing to do with actual peppers. And I could be wrong, but I think what makes this album cover so iconic is how psychedelic it is. Like, if I'm wrong, then please correct me in the comments, because I'm not that smart. But what does Jack's version of Sgt. Pepper look like? He puts actual peppers on the cover. Like, he is the only dude who remembers the Beatles, yet he can't get that right. Now, I actually have to confess, I didn't watch the entire movie. And the reason why I didn't watch the entire movie was because I was watching this on a DVD, and as Jack was performing the song Help, my DVD player just froze. I couldn't rewind it, I couldn't fast forward, I couldn't do anything. So then I just decided to just give up and say, nope, this movie's terrible, and I actually have a good reason for why it sucks. In fact, speaking of that, I might do a story time on the whole thing that happened with the DVD player. But I did Google how the thing ended, and I forgot to do a little spoiler alert, so sorry if I did that. Sorry if I did it at the last minute, so yeah. Now, the way it ends is Jack tells Ellie that he loves her, they get married, they have children, and they live a happy life. And the ending is set to Obla Di Obla Da from the White Album. I really like that song. And then Jack becomes a school teacher, and he continues to share the Beatles' music to a new generation, with zero regrets with the fact that he had to plagiarize all of their music. Oh, and by the way, the Beatles, cigarettes, and Coke were not the only things that everyone forgot about. They even forgot about my homeboy, my hero, Harry Potter. And, like, this is the million-dollar question. What does Harry Potter have to do with the Beatles besides the fact that Harry looks a little bit like a young version of John Lennon? Seriously, he actually does kind of look like John Lennon. And yeah, not even Harry was safe from this. And by the way, there is one thing that I liked about this movie. And there's just one thing that I liked. There is a scene where Jack visits John Lennon's house, and he apparently wants to ask John how he can tell Ellie that he loves her. And why do I like that scene? Well, when John showed up, it looked so much like him. Like, even though it was just an actor, the likeness to John was so amazing. It looked like, it actually looked like John if he was still alive today. And apparently he's still alive in this movie because, like, the Beatles weren't famous anymore, and supposedly John did not get shot. But yeah, I don't know how they were able to do it, but they did it. And if you're curious, this is what he looks like. Impressive, right? Better than my editing skills. Too bad that effort was wasted for such a bad movie. So yeah, John Lennon scene, the only pass I give this movie, while the rest of it just sucked. Now, if you like this movie, that is awesome. I'm glad you can enjoy something that I just can't. And normally when movie reviewers would review bad films, they would say, don't watch this movie. But if you want to watch this movie, haven't seen it, go ahead and do that. But I personally wouldn't recommend it, so yeah, if you want to watch this movie, I guess I can't stop you. And yeah, overall, I give this movie a 3 out of 10. And yeah, this was my reasoning of why I didn't like the Yesterday movie. I'm really sorry, but I just hated it. And if you want me to review more movies, then let me know in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.